Great. Hello and welcome again, Sarah. I'm so excited to have you as a part two, because I know that our first part was more touching on a few questions about dyslexia, your connection to the Orton-Gillingham Academy. But I know that we had talked more about, let's delve more into your specific story. And I know that there are a lot of folks out there who really want to hear more about that. So I want to introduce myself again. If those of you who are new to my work in this YouTube channel, I am Dr. Lauren. I am the founder of Think Dyslexia and Think Dyslexia Network. And I'm also a special educator. And the purpose of my YouTube channel and my Instagram page and all my social media platforms is to really give that knowledge, resources, information for folks out there who really need to know more about dyslexia. And so I love doing these interviews because I love to empower dyslexics and I love for other people to hear these stories. So Sarah, welcome back.
Thank you, Dr. Lauren.
So can you quickly introduce yourself so the audience has an idea of who you are and what the context of this conversation will be like?
Of course. My name is Sarah Takeuchi, and I was born and raised in Japan, but now I'm in Canada and I work as a learning specialist. So I use Orton-Gillingham approach to teach children with dyslexia, ADHD, all sorts of learning, specific learning disabilities.
That's great. And I know I had said in the first video, we have a lot in common. I'm a learning specialist at a private school, and so are you. And so I love that we're both in the academy. But let's delve into your story. So I'm really curious to know how is dyslexia and learning disabilities really viewed in the Japanese community? Because I feel like that will set the tone for your story as well. So could you share a little bit about that?
Mm-hmm. Well, recently I started to distinguish between the two groups of Japanese communities.
Okay.
I think the first group is the Japanese people living in Japan, where I used to belong before coming to Canada. And then the second group is the Japanese people living abroad, where I belong now. And I've noticed that most people living in Japan have never heard of the term dyslexia, and that includes educators.
Wow.
And I think there's a domino effect of not being able to get diagnosis at an early age. And even with a diagnosis later on in life, there is not a lot of support due to the lack of resources.
Mm.
And then children continue to experience academic challenges, and that inevitably leads to their low self-esteem. And I think this affects a lot of the parents too. And since they're not getting the information that they need, they have trouble advocating for their child. And I
Right.
think they feel stuck and helpless. And because no one's talking about it in Japan, I think they go through this phase of where they think they are the only ones feeling this way,
Mhm.
and they get a lot of stress, and the fear of the unknown can probably lead to a lot of mental health issues, and it can take a toll on the family relationship. Now, fortunately, most of the Japanese people living abroad have heard of the term dyslexia at least once, whether from a child's school, teachers, mom friends,
Mhm.
or from their community. And when you are around those people who are knowledgeable about dyslexia, and when your community embraces learning differences, you're more likely to be able to help your child succeed in school by being proactive with accommodations or teaching your child how to advocate themselves while being an advocate yourself, depending on the age of the child.
Right,
And
right.
yeah, and also explaining to them that there is nothing wrong with being dyslexic or learning differently from their peers. But it is safe to say that both communities are still undereducated in what
Mhm.
dyslexia is and how to go about it. So, to support families in need, my goal is to raise awareness and educate Japanese communities around the world as someone who went through it, so children can grow up being confident in who they are.
I love that. I love how you broke it down to two different, culture. I guess, is it kind of culturally? It's like if you're actually living and growing up in Japan versus if you're going abroad, because that's another level of culture you're gaining and exposed to. So that makes a lot of sense for sure. And I really appreciate you setting the tone for the audience about that. So let's delve into your story. And I know that you talked a little bit about that in the first interview. And I know that you had highlighted a little bit about how you think you might have gotten this from your father. And, and I think that it was just such an interesting story. So those of you who have not seen the first video, definitely pause and watch that and then come back and listen to this. But can you give us an overview about your journey when you were diagnosed, how you felt, all of that kind of stuff?
Yeah, my journey of me realizing that I was dyslexic started at the age of 15. And actually, at the age of 27 right now, I have my dyslexia journey that I'm trying to endeavor. And I call that Dyslexic Helping Dyslexics.
Okay, I like it.
And I want to talk a little bit about that and how I think it started when I was diagnosed in high school. And back then, I wanted to know more about why I couldn't read and why I was the way I was.
Mhm.
And back then, I didn't know how I was going to use this experience, but I knew that I couldn't stay in Japan. So I came to Canada to study at Simon Fraser University. And I ended up graduating with a major in psychology and a minor in learning and developmental disabilities.
Okay.
And I found a job here. And the position was to teach reading and writing to children with language-based learning disabilities using the Orton-Gillingham approach. And the school was going to train me on it, but I didn't know what it was.
Right, of
So,
course.
so I dove in head first and I kind of just hope for the best. And that's how my journey started to help dyslexic students. To answer the second part of your question, owning my dyslexia is still work in progress. And I want to be brave and share this. But 3 years ago, I had to update my psychoeducational testing. And it ended up my reading comprehension and fluency was 1%.
Wow.
So I have to read everything multiple times to,
Mhm.
to understand what my peers can understand easily.
Right.
And I think owning my learning difference includes being self aware and
Exactly.
constantly working on your weaknesses. And my strategies are to help or to read multiple times,
Mhm.
especially in an email, write down the key points if I'm reading notes or academic journals, and check my calendar for my availabilities if it was for like a meeting email, and consider travel time if I need to attend meetings in person so
Right.
that I have enough time to get there.
Right. Right.
And these weaknesses, this still affects me at work. And it definitely affected a few years ago when I just started working. For example, I get nervous sending quick emails because
Right.
it takes a lot of my brain energy to put my thoughts into words. And an email should be very nice and short to the point, and I have a hard time doing that. And when I started working, I always used to ask my coworkers to proofread my emails.
Right.
One- and one of them probably she just had enough and she was like, "Why are you asking me when your emails look perfectly fine?" And
Mhm.
that for her to say that, it really helped me be comfortable because that told me that she wasn't reading it and she didn't think there was anything wrong with it. So that really helped me be more comfortable sending emails. And the app Grammarly, have you heard of that app?
Yes, I have.
That definitely helps.
Yes.
And
Yes.
even with those things in place, that nervousness within me is still there. And it
Mhm.
still does take a lot of effort for me to craft a simple email.
Mhm.
But I think what helps me own my dyslexia is when I'm able to use my strength at work. And I think I'm a creative person. So when we shifted to remote learning due to the pandemic last year, I was able to help the school by creating a few online resources.
Oh, that's great.
Yeah, and that was very exciting because I was able to use my creative side to help the school out. So I would say it's the small wins in
Right.
life that help me able to accept my dyslexia and overcome my weaknesses.
And I think I love you touched on so many important things. And I also have to say, I love that you gave some strategies that work for you that I'm sure that people are listening that they're like, oh, I do that too, or oh, I never thought about that. So I love that. And I think it's just like anything in life, we are a work in progress. And I think just like you had said, once we own something, we really have to own it. And then we have to kind of work it out to figure out what works for us. And I actually have a follow-up question. Have you told your coworkers or your boss that you're dyslexic? Because I know that's sometimes a hot topic button for some people.
Yeah. At the beginning, when I started working, I told my boss, well, the whole the interview crew, when you go through that
Right.
interview, I told them that I was dyslexic because I was so scared that I would come across as a fake once they accepted me and I dropped this bomb that I'm dyslexic and I need more time to write reports, or I'm learning a little bit slower than my peers. And I was so scared for that to be the reality once I get the job
Right.
that I
Right.
told them right off the bat, I was like, I'm dyslexic, but I do my best to keep up with my peers. But in terms of my coworkers, I was so blessed by having two amazing, they're all amazing, but two of them started at the same year. And
Okay.
they are so understanding and so supportive. So yeah, I did tell those two coworkers that I was dyslexic.
Yeah. And so did you find when you told your boss or the people that hired you, were they like, what's that? Or were they like, oh, okay. Or were they like, how can we support you? Because I feel like you could get three different or several different responses to that.
Yeah, I was lucky because I was applying to a school who helps children with dyslexia. So when they found out, they were like, okay, it wasn't a big deal. It was a
Right.
matter of if I was going to learn from it or not.
Right. Right. And it sounds like you were placed in the right environment as a teacher who now you can support the students that are going through some challenges that maybe you didn't know was going on with you, but now you know how to really give them tools and strategies. So I love that. And I love that you were able to have your coworkers, or you were able to see, hey, I can be confident in this email. I can, send this. And I think that's a part of the journey too, because the second guessing and let me make sure there are no typos, or does this make sense, can really be daunting, especially if you're working and you're trying to send what the average typical person would be like, this would take me 5 minutes to send. Maybe it takes you a half hour because you want to make sure you're communicating it correctly. Your grammar is professionally, sound. So I absolutely get that. And I think I will say I have heard other adult dyslexics say, um, you need to tell your boss and your coworkers, because if there are mistakes that maybe you missed, they're not going to say, man, Sarah's stupid. They're going to say, oh, how can I support you? Or, hey, do you need someone to check your longer reports before you turn them in, or whatever that might be? And then you feel as an adult supported and valued, rather than feeling self-confident and like, gosh, I really can't do this. So I just love everything you said. And I feel like you've been on this positive journey. And I just really hope so many people are taking that information away, because it's great.
Thank you.
Yes. So I want to ask you another question. And I know that there's not one answer for this. And I always do this. I ask sometimes these questions that I'm looking for, like, just, what is that one thing or one person? But I know that this is a journey to get us where we are today. But I'm still going to ask, is there one person or one thing that you feel really molded who you are today for you to feel like an empowered dyslexic, and why?
That is so kind, Dr. Lauren, for you to think that I'm a strong, empowered dyslexic today.
You are, Sarah. You are.
That is so kind. But to answer your question, definitely my parents played a huge role. And I think I did get into that in the first interview. So
Yes.
I want to get into how I how I became who I am now through my working experience.
Yes.
And I think my students helped me a lot to be who I am today, because my first year of working, like I said, I only told a few people, like the hiring crew, two of my coworkers, and I think my mentor, who was
Mhm.
supposed to who I was directly under, and she
Right.
was checking all my reports and whatnot. So I told her that I was dyslexic. And at that point in life, I was not necessarily proud of being dyslexic. And I
Right.
was fixated on the negatives rather than the positives of being dyslexic, like taking longer to write an email or taking longer to read a book. And I was very fixated on the negatives. But towards the end of the first year, I realized that I was being a hypocrite because
Mm.
because I was telling my students
One thing.
one thing that I was like, that I was confident and they should be confident as well. And I knew that they were going to be successful regardless of their reading and writing skills. And then here I was feeling defeated because of
Right.
the same thing that we had. And I struggled to balance between being an advocate for my students versus how I felt about myself, because they were both genuine feelings.
Right.
And I truly believed that my students are going to be successful. But here I am, I compared myself to my coworkers, those two coworkers that I helped me a lot, but they were younger than me because I repeated grade 9 in
Okay.
Japan. And in Canada, you enter grade 1 at the age of 5. So
Mhm.
some of the students or some people start university or college at the age of 17.
Right.
And I started college at 19.
Okay.
So when we graduated and when we entered the workforce, I realized that I was 2 years behind everybody.
Right.
But
Right.
that was a big shock, and it made me feel more insecure about my
Mhm.
age and how slow I was going in life. And I would say there were a few factors that played a role in who I am as a person right now. But the biggest wake up call was when I realized that there were quite a few dyslexic at my work,
Mhm. Yes.
besides the students,
Right.
besides
Besides the kids.
the kids. And they were doing very well. So
Mm.
I spoke to some of them, and it was very inspiring. And they shared me not just their success stories, but the difficulties that they faced. And that made me realize that, of course, we all have difficulties, but it's the matter of whether we learn from it and how we
Right.
tackle that issue differently next time. And I also learned that successful and happy people are self aware of their strength and
Yes.
they keep honing their skills.
Mhm.
So I was inspired by these strong, empowered dyslexics in my life. So I wanted to be exactly that for my students. So
I
there's
love
no
that.
one size fits all,
Right.
but I want my students to look at adult dyslexics and feel empowered. So
Right.
it was a rough start for me, but I'm glad I'm glad that you perceived me as a strong and empowered dyslexic. Thank you.
Yes, yes. Well, and I really feel like everyone's journey is so different. And hearing someone who was diagnosed at 7 versus someone who was diagnosed like yourself at 15 versus someone who's diagnosed in their 40s, everyone's story and whether or not they find that empowerment early on or later, it's still that journey of understanding like, who am I in the context, first of all, of this society that, as we know, and the work we do, in our own bubbles, we do know what dyslexia is. The parents know what it is. Orton-Gillingham, that's our bubble. But really, the sole purpose that I'm putting this information out there on my page and this YouTube channel is because there are too many dyslexic out there who don't feel empowered and who feel like they're alone. And so I feel like in order to change that narrative, even if people are not, what I kind of view it as like an affirmation. So when we really don't feel happy and good, and don't get me wrong, if we're having a bad day, we're entitled to have a bad day. But if we're constantly not feeling good about ourselves, if we can kind of trick our brains a little bit, we'll start really actually feeling like, you know what, I am great. I can do this. And so I feel like if we are putting out information to say like, you can be empowered and you are, it's it's good vibes to kind of get that going, to hear your story and other stories and to feel like, okay, I can do this. So I love how you said your parents, and that was from the beginning, then your students. And I loved how you were so reflective to understand like, wait a second, I'm telling them one thing, but I'm not living that. And I think
Yeah.
that's an area of strength for you, where you were self-reflecting and realizing like, I'm not really buying what I'm selling, so I need to start buying what I'm selling, and that's great. And then knowing that you want to be that role model for other kids and other people, so they know like, hey, I am a strong dyslexic. So I love that, Sarah, and I really appreciate you delving into that, and also, like I said earlier, giving tips, because I know so many folks want to take away solid information, and so hearing some of your experiences, I know, makes a huge difference for others out there. So we are coming to the end of our interview. Is there anything else you want to share or any advice you want to give to our audience before we leave?
If you're dyslexic and hearing this, I just want to let you know that it's all going to be okay. And if you're a parent with a dyslexic child listening to this, I also want to tell you that everything's going to be okay.
I love that. I love
I
that.
just want to leave it at that.
Yes. Well, Sarah, thank you so much for hopping on for a part 2 to share a little bit more about your story. And as always, I love chatting with you, and also speaking to another Academy member. And I really hope we can maybe have a part 3. Who knows? We'll see.
Dr. Lauren, thank you again for the great opportunity to spread dyslexia awareness. Thank you.
Definitely. Well, have a great rest of your morning.
Thank you. You too.